Welcome everyone to our fourth Advocate Academy here in Texas on 504 plan preparation. With you, as always, are your wonderful hosts, Susan, that's me. I'm the NCLD field organizer. I have a child with ADHD and he was recently diagnosed with a visual motor processing disorder. As we were hearing before we got started, my husband is recently retired from the United States Air Force, so I no longer consider myself a military family advocate, though that's what I did in a previous life. And I'm also an adult with 2 diagnosed learning disabilities and ADHD. Amy.
Hi, everybody. Thank you for coming tonight. We're so excited to get to share all this helpful information. I hope you take something away from it and share with other people. But I am an occupational therapist by trade and assistive technology professional. I also have the privilege of raising an amazing daughter who has a specific learning disability and dyslexia. We call ourselves the dynamic duo because we got this dyslexia thing on every side. And I also get to write some AT articles and such for a dyslexia newsletter. So lots of things going on.
And it's fun.
It is super fun.
It's super fun. Now, Amy, did not know which parts of the slides you wanted to take, so I'm going to let you just start it all out for us, if that's all right.
That's perfect. Yes. Okay. So we're here talking about Section 504 and where that came from. The Rehab Act of 1973 was the first civil rights law for people with disabilities in the United States, and Section 504 is part of that Rehab Act. So what Section 504 really does is it actually prohibits disability discrimination from any program that receives federal funding, including the public schools. So any public K through 12 school that receives public funds, including charter schools and those and the like, are required to offer a 504 plan. In our first Advocate Academy, we provided a little bit more detail about Section 504 specifically and that Rehab Act. And at the end of this presentation, if you weren't a part of that one, there'll be a hyperlink so you can take a look at that at a later date.
Okay.
All right, so what does the 504 plan require? It's kind of a two-pronged thing. So 2 requirements include that 1, your child has a disability, and it can be any disability. Section 504 covers a much broader range of disabilities and diagnoses in the educational setting than as opposed to like IDEA and special education. And then the second part is that the diagnosis must actually interfere with the child's ability to learn in that general education setting. So the definition of the disability, like I said, is broader when you're talking a Section 504 plan and eligibility, and that it must substantially limit 1 or more basic life activities. Those life activities can include learning, reading, communicating, thinking, but that can also cover things like asthma or food allergies, learning disabilities, ADHD, digestive disorders, just a whole range of diagnoses that might interfere with one's ability to learn in the gen ed environment. So what is a 504 plan? Well, it's basically the educational blueprint for your child. The plan really outlines how your child's school will provide the support that they need for their education, and as well as the access to remove the barriers in the general education setting. So a 504 is really more about that access to the education as opposed to specially designed instruction, which is where a special education IDEA plan comes into place. And when we're talking about barriers, we're not just talking about curb cuts and elevators and things that are physical barriers, but we're talking about all educational barriers as well. We're going to talk a little bit more about the accommodations and modifications in a few slides from now. All right, and we keep referencing the differences, right, between an IEP, what a student in special education might have, versus a Section 504 plan. So when we're talking about an IEP, we're talking about a plan that provides the specially designed instruction. That's a special education, it's got the supports and that instruction piece. To be eligible, the student must have one of only 13 eligible disabilities that are outlined in IDEA that impact the child's educational performance and participation. So in addition to the accommodations and modifications and supports, the IEPs have the annual goals that are supported through the specially designed instruction, and the IEP must be updated annually. Okay, so a 504 is different. It is a plan for, just like we said a minute ago, removing the educational barriers in the general education setting. Okay, so a student can have any disability, right? It's pretty limitless as long as that disability interferes with the child's ability to learn in the gen ed setting. A 504 plan does have specific accommodations and supports that help the child learn. And the rules for this, for 504, it does vary a little bit from state to state when you're talking about updating a 504 plan, when, how, and how it's done. It does vary a little bit more than IDEA special education. All right, and here I'm going to pass this to my cohort, Susan, to tell us a little bit about what to do on the front side before a 504.
Yay! Amy, please jump in at this point too, because I know that you all do things a little bit differently in Texas. So I definitely would love to have your viewpoint on the evaluation process surrounding 504s. So, so we're here talking about preparation, right? And so what we need to do is talk about evaluations. And this is always kind of a hot area with parents because it just is. It's just a hot area. So in our Third Advocate Academy, we talked a lot about evaluations with IEPs, but remember, we're here today talking about 504 plans, and so that's going to be this focus. But remember the purpose behind any kind of an evaluation. It's to gather information that will help determine what your child's educational needs are. And it will also put together potentially some educational, some educational supports and or recommendations for the general education setting. So a student must show that they have a disability or a diagnosis and it impacts that one or more major life activity. We're going to say that phrase quite a bit because that is the basis of a 504. But the school isn't required to provide the same level or the same types of evaluations that would be performed for IEP eligibility. However, the team does need to consider, the 504 team does need to consider a review of all the students' work. And here's the thing. You're going to see, I always find this to be interesting because we saw in our home, and so I'm talking very much personally here, just the work that was being sent home every day, every week, we could see that there was something amiss by just reviewing his just the classroom work that was coming home. We also did a review of medical records and any previous evaluation reports. We asked for direct observation, which can be done. And then there were interviews that were conducted with the student and parents, me, hello, and then of course various school personnel. And then there are sometimes other assessments that are determined by the school that might be needed to help out. But moving back to the medical records and previous evaluation reports, as we know, there is no hard and fast test or any kind of an evaluation for ADHD. There just isn't. And so that's where a report from your child's pediatrician, especially for an ADHD diagnosis, really comes into, it comes into play. It's something that is used to determine eligibility for a 504 plan, especially regarding ADHD. But this, again, is kind of an interesting area. And the reason why I find this area to be, there's some gray, I think, Amy, is because if this is your initial foray into potentially the special education arena, and you've never had any kind of evaluation done at all, performed on your child at all, there's a pretty decent chance that the team is going to actually recommend a full evaluation, because if nothing has ever been performed, this includes a doctor's note verifying an ADHD diagnosis, right? There's a pretty decent chance that there's going to be an evaluation, because how else would you don't know, right? You don't know unless an evaluation is done, but that may not happen either. So you have to be prepared for the team to say, nope, there's no need to do a full evaluation. They may only do some kind of bits and pieces of the evaluations.
And I think that hinges too on if you feel like there is an academic deficit.
Yes.
right, that you're looking for? Are we looking for that area that needs that specially designed instruction, or
Yep.
is the child able to learn in gen ed? We just have to accommodate and
Yeah.
change a couple of little things up. So that's, I think, the biggest difference is if you're looking for
Yes.
that inability to learn given the gen ed curriculum.
Bingo. Bingo. So this is where evaluations do become a very interesting area. But also, if an evaluation is performed by the school, then please follow up. Ask them, ask the school, ask the team, ask the people who perform the evaluations about the assessments that were performed. Ask as many questions as you can and make sure you get answers, because you need them. And you are deserving of them. You are the grown-up in your child's life. And so it's okay to ask these kinds of questions. Like with everything, there's always super fun terms to know. And we have, 2 slides here about the various terms and phrases. And the one you're going to hear the most is accommodation. And that is a change to how or where a child is taught, or how the materials are used for teaching. I give this as an example of an accommodation from my son's very first 504. He has auditory processing disorder, a spatial auditory processing disorder, and he needs a quiet setting, a quiet place, away from the kids. And so his teacher, as part of his 504, in there was the accommodation that there was a little workspace set aside from the kids where he would put on his little noise canceling headphones, and he would grab his stuff and walk on over there all happy and cute and get his work done very quickly. But that is an example of how the materials were being used for instruction in the general education setting. It was a change to where he was also taught. He wasn't, and it wasn't that he was being excluded. It was just, okay, I need to get over here to accomplish this task. It's just too much. It's too loud, it's too noisy, it's too distracting. The Americans with Disabilities Act is a federal civil rights law which prohibits discrimination against people with disabilities. This includes K through 12 and higher education. We're going to talk a lot more about higher education and transitions with our 5th Advocate Academy, but this law is probably going to come into the conversation quite a bit. We also have least restrictive environments, believe it or not. As with an IEP, the least restrictive environment is applicable and can be applicable for students with 504 plans. Again, I will reference that accommodation with my son. His least restrictive environment was just a little desk off to the side and not surrounded by all the other kids. So that seemed to help him tremendously. And students with disabilities, they do need to learn in the same set. A student with a disability who also has a 504, they will be in the same setting as other students, but you can create a least restrictive environment within that setting. Supplementary aids and services, these are the supports that will help children learn in the general education classroom, such as assistive technology, and our friend Amy is very good with AT. Okay. The general education curriculum. So that's what every kid in public school is expected to know and have mastered by the time they graduate. I don't know what you guys call them, your STAR tests, right? They're stars?
Yeah, we have stars, and so the general ed curriculum is the TEKS,
Yes.
the grade level TEKS.
Okay, so that is always, you'll have those kinds of testing, that the schools will perform to see if your children have mastered the general education curriculum. Modification is a change in what the student is expected to learn, or how the students are expected to learn in the general education setting. Modifications and accommodations are different. We're going to get into that actually, I think, in just 2 more slides. So I promise we will go over that information and make sure that we expand on accommodations and modifications. Disability, again, your child must have a diagnosis or a disability to receive a 504 plan, and it must impact a major life activity. So that would be kids who are struggling with learning, reading, thinking, writing, or concentrating. They usually qualify. Okay.
All right, so parent rights. This is another big difference between IDEA.
That was me.
Back up.
Yep. Nope. Goodness, I'm sorry.
There we go. No worries. So this is another big difference between an IEP with IDEA. IDEA really outlines the procedures and how the parental rights are given when you're talking about an IDEA. And it's a little bit different. It's not as clear, and it's not the same for a 504. So this is something that as a parent, you need to make sure that you're really comfortable with what you really understand a 504 provides for you as a parent and as a participant, and be able to really exercise those rights, because it's not going to be as straightforward in all instances as with IDEA. So what can you do? I suggest this to every parent, whether you're in process or not. Have you ever requested your child's records? You really should. You can request and review at any point your child's educational records and their schoolwork before any meeting or whenever you feel like it, truly. The FERPA law really, it requires the district provide you access. They don't have to necessarily provide you copies, but they have to provide you access and the opportunity to review the records that you've requested within 45 days. So you want to plan ahead where that's concerned, on the chance that they really take all 45 days before they give you that opportunity. You want to make sure that you're communicating with the 504 coordinator for the campus. A lot of times here in our district, that's one of the grade level or assistant principals. So make sure that you're invited and you're included in those meetings, right? Get the accommodations, get whatever's going to be proposed, get it ahead of time and review that and make sure it's something that you're comfortable with. Feel free to always ask for clarification about what's being proposed. I know sometimes those meetings can be a little bit intimidating for parents. Even if you've sat on the other side of the table before, it's always different when it's your own kid. But you need to be able to be comfortable in asking for clarification. And if you're not going to feel comfortable doing that, make sure that you have someone with you that can help you understand a little bit better. Make sure that you're requesting a copy, an actual hard copy, final version of your child's 504 plan, and put that in a binder. We're going to talk about that in a little bit as well. And then follow up, make sure you're following up about how that plan is being implemented with your child, with the child's teacher. And something else that I like to kind of include here too is that as your child gets older, it's really appropriate to start empowering him or her to have their accommodations on them, to know what they need, and to be able to advocate for themselves, whether you're talking 504 or IDEA. And the parental rights too.
Do you want me to go back?
No, but I'm gonna use you as an example because like you said, when we introduced ourselves, that you too have a learning disability, a learning difference. And so the ADA accommodations, they go for parents that have disabilities too. So you're protected as a parent who needs a little bit of support or accommodations to be able to do the process too. So it's very broad.
Why did this go so far ahead? What is going on, Amy? I'm sorry, everyone. This is my fault.
That's okay.
Man, ugh. Okay, sorry, everyone.
It's ready for the debates too.
Yeah.
So,
but also, yes, I do receive ADA accommodations. In fact, I had to ask for them recently to have some information sent to me ahead of time, so I would have time to read it over and make my notes and everything like that. And yeah, it's, you know, ADA applies to adults with disabilities as well, and I want parents to remember that it's about accessibility for them too.
Right.
Okay.
All right, and here's what we've been talking about, right? We'll get to it now. We're here, accommodations and modifications. There is a difference, right? We always see them lumped together like we have here on this slide, right? And they're always in the same breath, but they are different. But they both are part of a 504 plan that depends on, of course, an individualized based on your child's needs and their diagnosis. So what is the difference? Okay, the accommodation, like we mentioned before, is what or how the student is learning in the classroom. Okay, so some examples for an accommodation might be, my kiddo that has dyslexia uses audiobooks a lot. So that's an accommodation. Maybe maybe they need a little bit more time for testing, or maybe they need to, like Susan said, her son has kind of a study carrel, or maybe they need to sit at the front of the class, so where they're seated in the classroom for optimal participation. Maybe when they're writing, they need to use spell check, or be able to move to a quiet setting when they're doing independent reading so that they can read out loud instead of having to do it just silently in their head. Okay, so modifications then that's what the child is being taught or what they're being expected to learn. So it's changing what that looks like. Some examples might be, if you're talking about PE, maybe this kiddo doesn't run as many laps as the rest of the kids, or in a reading assignment, they have fewer pages, same content, but fewer pages are required, or a similar spelling assignment, but with fewer words. So something that just gives a little bit more flexibility in what the student is expected to know. What you really need to know, though, also is both accommodations and modifications are data points. So they have to be measured. You want to make sure that your child is being provided the help that they need, and that it's an appropriate amount of help. The other caveat to accommodations and modifications are, they are a great support, and they are the equalizer in a lot of senses. But when we're talking about accommodations and modifications, you have to be very aware that you're not diminishing what the child is truly having to learn, that you're not taking away that opportunity for those general education curriculum to be able to master what we call here TEKS, right? You don't want to change what your child is actually knowing. Does that make sense? I hope. Okay. Documentation. This is super important, you guys. Everybody has their own system, and there's a lot of, if you can just go out and Google systems of organizing IEP binders, 504, but the point is that you want to keep yourself organized. You want to make sure to keep all of your documentation that's provided by the school, work samples, all kinds of things, how you're tracking your child's progress based on what they're being provided through their 504 with their accommodations and modifications. I know a lot of times when accommodations have been provided in testing situations or on homework, I'll see at the top of the work that comes home what accommodation was provided, and that's really helpful. So if you keep all of that, that might be an awful lot, but you might want to get some sort of tracking chart or something that you can document over time what that looks like. Another thing that's really important, I think, is audio recording. Like I said earlier, sometimes it's uncomfortable when you go in those meetings and you go in and you've got your nerves and maybe you don't remember everything that was said. Check and see what the policy is for recording and being able to go back and reflect on that. A really great app for a mobile device, or it's even a Chrome extension, is Otter AI. It's here listed. It helps for recording, but it also does transcription, which is super fab, and it's free.
Well, I think we also have to talk about potential pitfalls, though, with 504s, right? And I know that when I first had my son evaluated back when he was in first grade and he was made not eligible, he was determined not to be eligible for an IEP, and we were going over to a 504, even with my special education background, I fell into the biggest pitfall of them all, which is the first one. I closed myself off to the possibilities of what a 504 plan can actually do. And I really did think of it as, this is just not going to be enough. And I was wrong. I really, I have to admit that I was definitely wrong. There are so many more possibilities than what we think. And sometimes it's easy to just skim it over and just go, okay, so here's your 504, wham, bam, thank you, bye-bye now. No, talk about those possibilities. You want to sit down and you want to know every single detail. Talk about it, ask questions, get in there. Don't close yourself off to the potential, the potential and the wonders of a potential 504 plan, right? Because there's actually a lot of really great possibilities and potential involved in one. Because we're talking about accommodations and modifications, these are things that could eventually be part of your child's everyday life that could help them in the long run. And what I mean is, I'm talking even in the world of employment, because that is what we're trying to do here one day, is have them not live with us forever and be gainfully employed. So potentially some of these potential accommodations and modifications could actually translate over into the world of employment. So don't close yourself off to the possibilities of a 504 plan. Don't be a passive participant though either. Just don't sit there and say, okay, well, sure, okay, whatever you guys decide. I don't really understand what anyone's saying, but sure, whatever. Nope, you don't understand what's going on. Ask some questions. If you're uncomfortable in the meeting asking some questions, then you know what? Take them home and take home that unsigned 504 plan and email the school and email the team and ask your questions. But don't just sit there and let everyone decide for you what's best for your child, because they don't know. They really don't. You're the parent. You're the growing up in this child's life. You know what's best. And here's the other thing. Here's something interesting. Like with IEPs, there's always like, oh, let's use this standard or template goal to accomplish X, Y, and Z task. That can still be done on a 504. There might be a standard or a template accommodation. One size does not fit all. Not every child with dyslexia and ADHD is going to get the same accommodations. It just doesn't work that way because, oh wait, these are individuals that we're talking about. And so what works for one student may not work for the next one, and they could potentially have the same diagnosis. So do not accept the accommodation that works for all kids with ADHD. It might not actually work for your kid. And don't fall into the pitfall of that the 504 plan is being implemented, because it might not be. You also need to monitor your child's progress too. And it's real. I always found this is actually pretty, I will say it's easy. It's not necessarily that it's easy, but again, you have schoolwork being sent home. Your child is taking, if you guys do spelling tests in Texas, I know some states don't do them anymore, but if they're still doing spelling tests, that's monitoring. That's progress monitoring. A math test, science, any way the school is evaluating your child to see if they have learned what has been taught to them. That is monitoring progress. And so make sure you follow up with that and follow up and ask, always in writing, always via email. How are those accommodations from the 504 working out for Susan? Is she, how is she doing? I see that her spelling scores though haven't improved much. So do we need to spend some time reviewing that accommodation again? Maybe this isn't the right one. Always ask. And then you need to push for an annual update. It's okay to sit here and think, oh, the school, we don't need to do that. No. Your children are growing every year and you're getting a new teacher every year. Push for an annual update. If your child is still getting the same accommodations that were given to them in first grade and sixth grade, something's not working then. There should have been some updates to the accommodations, everything. There should have been some kind of update done. And you don't have to sign the 504 plan at the end of the meeting, right? Bring it home, bring home a copy of it, look it over again, send in your questions, and then you can sign it. But you don't have to sign it at the end of the meetings. So it's quite all right. Amy, I don't remember. Are you doing this one or am I? Okay.
Sorry, I had to unmute myself. My dogs were going crazy.
That's okay.
So when you're sitting there and you're nervous, or when you're, it is uncomfortable, or you have your questions, you just have to remember why you're advocating. Why are you sitting there, right? You're going to want to research all the accommodations and modifications. You may be excited about a 504. You may be disappointed and think that a 504 isn't enough for your kiddo. You just have to really remember that who you're advocating for and why. This is your kid, your child, and you want to make sure that you are their voice and that you are able to help them until they can do this themselves, make sure that their needs are being met the way that they should be being met at school. Make sure you have the best plan you need. If your kiddo only needs a 504, that's great. Make sure it's the best that they can have. If they need more, make sure that they're getting that as well.
We have a bunch of linked articles for you. We're going to send out the slides with this recording so you can have all of these linked articles. I will say the surprising accommodations one actually did surprise me. That is not just a clever title. So there were definitely some surprises, and I was like, oh, I didn't even think about that being an accommodation. So yeah. And then I think, again, I think I may have two of the same ones in here, differences between IEPs and 504s. I will make sure before I send out the slides to you all that I fix that, because I'm sorry about that. Yeah, I'm sorry. And then we have our resources. I'm going to go through this quickly because we've done some of this. And again, we're going to send out these slides to you all with all of this information. So of course, we're going to put NCLD because this is NCLD, and we're going to put us as the first one in there. And in fact, we actually have our new, I'll have to give me a minute after we're done, but we have our new LD checklist, which is an interactive checklist, you guys. Oh my gosh, it's so exciting. So our new LD checklist is ready to go. And if you go through it and you actually, participate, click on everything, they will even populate various resources and everything for you. It's very good. We have Edutopia, Learning Disabilities Association of America, Understood. I love how they break down information. Council for Exceptional Children, Parent Center Hub, which is all the free parent centers across your state. You guys have a bunch in Texas, but it's because Texas is so massive. Rights Law. Yeah, and you guys are just a big state. I mean, you really are. You're just a big, big state. And Rights Law has sometimes, I don't know if they have, I don't know, they're not going to be doing any trainings this year in person, obviously, COVID. But it is a great, great resource. And then you have COPA, the Council of Parent Attorneys and Advocates. You can actually find advocates on there. If you join, it is a small fee. So just to forewarn everyone. Amy, I'm going to breeze through these pretty quickly because you don't have to read them all again.
No, yeah.
But I have heard Sped Text is the most amazing thing on the planet. I don't live in Texas, but when I live in Virginia, and I've heard Sped Text is amazing.
Mm-hmm. Sped Text it's my number one go-to when I have a question as a parent or a professional, because the way that it's staffed is by people that have been in education, have been high up in special education administration, and really they are so helpful and can provide information. All of them are great. Disability rights, all of these, Project First, there's so many in Texas.
Oh yeah, you guys have a lot too.
Yeah. So just know that you got this at your fingertips when you need it.
Yeah. So here are some more, your parent to parent. You guys just have a lot going on. Again, it's because the state is so massive. And I love it that you have in all these languages. That's exciting. And then here's the many ways that you can keep in touch with us. Amy, thank you for getting our Instagram on there. I really appreciate you. And then you can send us in, you can email us. And then we actually have, so when we send this out, we will include the hyperlink. So I'm going to just inundate you guys with this hyperlink. I'm really sorry about that. But I'm going to hyperlink this recording to how to prepare for our 504 plan meeting. And then we are going to plan for November, actually, are tying it all together, the transition into adulthood. This month coming up is the National Disability Employment Awareness Month. NADEM is what it's called, through the U.S. Department of Labor, as well as it is the LD, it's our LD Awareness Month in October too. And there's just a lot going on. And I think that people are very politically active this year. This is not me saying, one way or the other. I just see that people are really paying attention to a lot of their state and local races as well as national races. So we were going to try to have our Transition Advocate Academy in October, and it's just not going to work. And I think we're asking for a lot from people to try to force something into an already very crowded month. So we're going to push it into November. And so I'm excited about that. And also it gives us some time. We're going to try to get some videos from our Young Adult Leadership Council so they can share about their transitions. And I'm excited about that. The other big change that we've decided to do is we're going to shift these to 201 Advocate Academies to the new year, so January, February 2021. And what we've decided, and the reason why we wanted to do that is, well, in Texas, you guys will start your new legislative session in 2021. And so we'd like to have some research under our belts first, so we can better prepare and share with you all what is going on in your state and where you can plug in to advocate. But we also want to get together ways for you to share your story, how to fact check, how to do some research, how to understand these policies. As I like to remind parent advocates, your story is unbelievably powerful. And never forget that. There's a reason why we have special education law to begin with, and it came from parents sharing powerful stories and stories that were at that point quite heartbreaking. And because of that, and because of those powerful stories, they were able to make systemic change. And I truly believe, as I think, naive and hopeful as I sound right now, I do believe in the power of a person's story, and I know that it can make great change. But we also need to share how to do that. And so we would like the time to really prepare a good state and local advocacy meeting, advocacy training session, as well as a federal advocacy training for you all. So why rush, right? And then make sure that it's actually halfway decent. Well, it's going to be more than halfway decent. It's going to be great. So we want it to be great for you all. And then that's it. We are done.
We had a couple or a question come in.
Let me stop recording then.
Okay.